You know the feeling. You've got a fistful of quarters and you're standing in a dark room that smells like carpet cleaner and sugar and something electric you could never quite name. The screens are glowing. The sound is everywhere. 17 different games making 17 different promises at the same time. And somewhere in the back of that room, there's a cabinet that's been eating quarters all afternoon. You can see it from across the room. There's a crowd around it. Not a crowd of people winning. A crowd of people watching someone else lose. And when that someone loses, they step back. And the next person steps forward. And the machine takes another quarter and resets to the beginning, like nothing happened. Like it was never even a contest. That is the arcade. That is exactly what it was. And the games on this list were the reason those crowds existed. Not because they were unbeatable, because they were engineered. Specifically, deliberately, and in some cases almost artistically engineered to take your money, give you just enough to keep you interested, and then throw you back out into the mall with empty pockets and a very specific kind of determination that made you want to come back next weekend and do it all over again. These are the 10 arcade games designed to make you quit. And they still took every quarter you had. If you grew up in the golden age of arcades, if you've got the calluses and the emotional damage to prove it, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel was built for you. And stay until the end, because number 1 on this list is going to start an argument. We are counting on it. Let's get into it. Number 10, Gauntlet, Atari Games, 1985. We are starting this list with one of the most honest games ever put in an arcade, because Gauntlet didn't hide what it was. It didn't pretend to be something else. It looked you in the eyes and told you exactly what was about to happen. And you put your quarter in anyway. Gauntlet, Atari Games, 1985. The dungeon crawler that defined what it meant for an arcade game to eat quarters, because Gauntlet was the first game that made the quarter-eating mechanic part of the actual design, not a side effect. The feature. Here's how it worked. You pick your character, warrior, Valkyrie, elf, wizard. You start fighting your way through dungeons filled with enemies that pour out of generators as fast as you can kill them. Your health bar ticks down the whole time, not just when enemies hit you, constantly. Every second you are alive and playing this game, your health is draining, and the only way to stop it from draining is to find food hidden in the dungeons, which requires you to keep playing, which requires you to keep surviving, which requires you to insert another quarter when you run out of health, which you will, because the game is designed to make sure you do. The voice told you. You heard it every single time. Warrior, your life force is running out. That voice. If you played Gauntlet in 1985 or 1986, that voice is burned into your memory in a place that even 40 years of living hasn't managed to reach. Because it wasn't a warning, it was a transaction. The game was telling you, this is about to end, and the only way to prevent that is to make a financial decision right now, in the next 5 seconds, with your friends watching. And the social pressure of that moment, of being at a cabinet with 2 or 3 friends, of having them look at you when the voice came on, of nobody wanting to be the first one to step away, is what made Gauntlet one of the most effective quarter-eating machines ever built. The co-op was the trap, because playing with friends meant none of you wanted to be the first to leave. You'd drain quarter after quarter just to stay in the run, because leaving felt like quitting on your team. Gauntlet knew that. Gauntlet was built around that. It is number 10 on this list because it was generous enough to show you what it was doing. The games above it were not that honest. Number 9, Ghosts and Goblins, Capcom, 1985. If you watched our NES videos, you already know what Ghosts and Goblins is, and you might be thinking we already covered this one. We did. But the home version and the arcade version are different experiences, and the arcade version deserves its own conversation, because in the arcade, the cruelty hits differently. Ghosts and Goblins, Capcom, 1985. You play as Arthur, the knight in armor, running to the right, throwing weapons at zombies and demons while trying to rescue the princess. 2 hits, and you die. The first hit knocks your armor off. The second hit kills you. In an arcade where you are standing in front of strangers, where dying means everyone around you can see you running around in boxer shorts before the screen goes dark and asks for another quarter. There is a specific flavor of public humiliation that Ghosts and Goblins invented that no other game on this list can match. Every death was a performance, and the game scheduled those performances constantly. The enemy placement is surgical. Zombies rise from the ground in spots where your instinct tells you to jump. Something is waiting at the top of that jump. You land in the wrong place. You take the hit. You're in the underwear. The whole cabinet shakes, and somewhere behind you, someone snorts. In the arcade, the second loop is where the real crime happens. You fight through the entire game, burn through quarters, reach the end, defeat Astaroth, and the game tells you it was a fake, that the ending was an illusion, that you have to do it all again on a harder difficulty to see the real ending. That message on the screen, surrounded by strangers in a loud arcade, knowing you just burned a fistful of quarters to reach an ending that didn't count, is one of the most memorable moments of betrayal in the history of gaming. Some of you are going to say Ghosts and Goblins belongs higher on this list. Make your case in the comments. We want to hear it. Number 8. Gradius, Konami, 1985. Here's where the list starts to get genuinely mean. Gradius, Konami, 1985. A horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up where you pilot a spacecraft called the Vic Viper through waves of alien enemies, building up a power-up chain that turns your little ship into something genuinely formidable. Option pods that follow your movement and mirror your shots. Speed upgrades, missiles, lasers, double. You spend the early stages of a Gradius run, building something. Carefully, deliberately, managing your power-up gauge, making decisions about which upgrade to take and when, until you've constructed a ship that feels almost unstoppable. And then you die. One hit. That's all it takes. And when you die in Gradius, you lose everything. Every upgrade, every option pod, every laser. Every piece of the machine you built over the last several minutes evaporates instantly, and you respawn as the weakest possible version of your ship. Right in the middle of the screen that just killed you. Surrounded by the same enemies that just killed you, with none of the tools you had when you died. It is the most complete destruction of progress in any game on this list. You don't just die, you go backwards, and then the death spiral starts. You respawn weak. You get hit again immediately, because the screen is still full of enemies. You respawn even weaker. You get hit again. There is a point in a Gradius death spiral where there is no coming back, where the game has decided you are done, and all you can do is watch it happen, quarter by quarter, until you give up or run out of money, whichever comes first. The Gradius death spiral is uniquely sadistic, because it removes your ability to play your way out of it. You are not losing, because you are not skilled enough. You are losing, because the game's own mechanics have made skilled play impossible. That distinction matters. That is not difficulty. That is a trap with very pretty graphics. And some of you are going to argue that Gradius belongs in the top 5. That argument is not wrong. Number 7. Dragon's Lair, Cinematronics, 1983. We need to talk about Dragon's Lair because Dragon's Lair is a different category of everything on this list. Dragon's Lair, Cinematronics, 1983. The Laserdisc game that made grown men weep openly in public places and still somehow maintained a line at every cabinet it ever touched. First, the context. Dragon's Lair cost 50 cents to play at a time when every other arcade game cost a quarter, double the price. Before you even touched the joystick, you had already paid twice as much as you would have paid for anything else in the building. And Cinematronics was betting, correctly, that the animation alone would justify that price. Don Bluth's animation was unlike anything anyone had ever seen on a screen inside an arcade. The colors, the fluidity, the sheer cinematic quality of watching Dirk the Daring navigate the witch's lair, and the Bubbles Room and the Dragon's Cave. It looked like a Disney movie that you could interact with, and that was exactly the problem. Here's what Dragon's Lair actually was under all that gorgeous animation. A series of binary choices. Move at the exact right moment in the exact right direction, or die. That is the entirety of the game, There is no reaction window. There is no skill curve. There is no reading of patterns that improves with practice in any organic way. There is only the sequence, the specific, memorized, completely non-intuitive sequence of inputs that you must execute in perfect order. Or watch Dirk die in a way that is, credit to Bluth, genuinely beautiful to look at. People who were good at Dragon's Lair weren't good at it because they had better reflexes. They were good at it because they had memorized the sequence. They had died to each scene enough times that their hands knew what to do before their brain did. That is not a video game skill. That is a recitation. It is the difference between playing an instrument and lip-syncing a song you know by heart. And the line behind you, the 5 or 6 people waiting their turn, watching you die in spectacular animated fashion, and trying to memorize from your mistakes what they were supposed to do differently. That line is the whole Dragon's Lair experience. It was a shared classroom where the curriculum was dying beautifully, quarter after quarter, until someone finally got it right. Dragon's Lair at number 7, and if you think it should be higher, tell us why. We want that debate. Number 6, Final Fight, Capcom 1989. 6. And this is where we start getting into the games that didn't just take your quarters, they took your dignity. Final Fight, Capcom, 1989, the beat-em-up that defined the genre at the end of the decade. Hager, Cody, Guy, Metro City, the Mad Gear Gang. A game that looked incredible, sounded incredible, and played like a dream for about half its runtime. And then the back half happened. Here's what most people don't talk about when they remember Final Fight fondly. The enemy design in the late stages is specifically constructed to overwhelm 3-player co-op with enough simultaneous threats that somebody is going to get grabbed. And somebody getting grabbed means somebody taking massive damage. And massive damage in an arcade means somebody needs a quarter. And needing a quarter in the middle of a boss fight means the social pressure of the cabinet kicks in full force. The Andore family. The wrestlers who grab you and pile drive you into the pavement. In the early stages, you can manage them. By the time you're in the Bay Area and the Uptown stages, they're coming 2 and 3 at a time, while Rolento is throwing grenades, and Poison is doing that ridiculous back handspring move that somehow always connects. And the continues in Final Fight are not infinite. You get a set number of credits, and when they are gone, it is over. The game does not slow down to accommodate you. It just keeps running at full speed, and lets the credits run out, and shows you the continue screen, and watches the clock count down from 9, knowing full well you are not going to make a rational decision in that window. Belger, the final boss. If you made it to Belger and you died, and you had just used your last credit, the specific feeling of that moment is one that anyone who experienced it has never fully let go of. Final Fight is a masterpiece of arcade design. It is also a game that specifically structured its difficulty to maximize the number of moments where you needed to make a financial decision under emotional pressure. Both of those things are completely true. Number 5, X-Men, Konami, 1992. Number 5. And this one requires a conversation about the cabinet itself, because the cabinet is the whole story. X-Men, Konami, 1992, the 6-player cabinet, 2 linked screens, Cyclops, Colossus, Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Dazzler fighting through Magneto's forces. If you ever walked into an arcade and saw that machine running at full capacity with all 6 players going at once, you know exactly what it looked like. It was the most spectacular thing in the room, and it was the most expensive thing in the room. Because 6 players burning quarters simultaneously is what that cabinet was built to achieve, and it achieved it with a precision that deserves to be studied. Here's the thing about X-Men that the nostalgia tends to smooth over. The game is not particularly hard in its early stages. It is designed specifically to be approachable and fun in those first few stages, to get all 6 players invested, to make the group dynamic feel rewarding, and then to ramp the difficulty at exactly the moment when everyone is too committed to walk away. You are deep into the run. You have got 5 other people next to you. The Sentinel levels hit. The enemies start coming faster. The hits start landing harder. And the group starts burning credits. And here is the cruelty of the 6-player format. Nobody wants to be the one who stops, because stopping means letting the other 5 down. Because you are a team now. You chose a character. You have been playing alongside these people for 20 minutes. Leaving the cabinet feels like desertion. So you put in another quarter, and then another. The Magneto fight at the end is where Konami put the final nail in. Magneto hit hard and fast in ways that made the fight feel overwhelming even with 6 players, and the endgame credit burning was built directly into the encounter design. X-Men, the arcade game, is not famous because it was bad. It is famous because it was brilliant at making you feel like the money was worth it, right up until the point where it wasn't. Number 4. Ninja Gaiden, Tecmo, 1988. Number 4. And here is where some of you are going to push back immediately. Because when people think of Ninja Gaiden and difficulty, they think of the NES game, the bird enemies, the respawning, the boss rush. The arcade version of Ninja Gaiden is a completely different game, and it is a completely different category of punishing. Ninja Gaiden, Tecmo, 1988. The arcade version is a beat-em-up, not the action platformer you know from home. A side-scrolling brawler where Ryu Hayabusa fights his way through streets and warehouses full of enemies. And it is relentless in a way that the home version, for all its brutality, never quite manages. The enemy density in the Ninja Gaiden arcade game is the first thing that gets you. There is almost always at least one enemy attacking from behind. The game specifically positions threats to punish the instinct of handling what is in front of you first. Because while you are focused on what is ahead of you, something behind you is landing hits. And in an arcade game where health is finite and quarters are the only replenishment on offer, every hit from behind is a financial event dressed up as a gameplay moment. The boss encounters are where the arcade version separates itself from the home version entirely. The bosses are fast, aggressive, and designed with hit patterns that punish the reflexes you built fighting the regular enemies. The skills that got you to the boss are not the skills the boss is testing. That disconnect between what the game taught you to do and what the boss demands of you is a specific design philosophy. It is the game telling you, everything you learned to survive here does not count anymore. Start over. In an arcade, starting over costs money. And Ninja Gaiden Collected, some of you are going to say this belongs in the top 3. Some of you have never played the arcade version and are about to look it up. Both of those things are exactly what this list is for. Number 3. Raiden, Seibu Kaihatsu, 1990. Number 3, and this one is going to hit differently for anyone who spent serious time in early 1990s arcades. Raiden, Seibu Kaihatsu, 1990. The vertical scrolling shoot-'em-up that came out at the dawn of the Super Nintendo era and made very clear that it had no interest in being friendly to anyone who wasn't prepared to work for it. Here's what Raiden did that no other shooter on this list managed quite as effectively. It gave you the tools to be powerful, and then it built the later stages around the assumption that you had mastered those tools perfectly, while simultaneously designing the mid-game in a way that made mastering those tools genuinely difficult. The power-up chain. The difference between the blue laser and the red spread shot and knowing exactly when to switch and why. The bomb system and when to hold it versus when to spend it. Raiden rewarded expertise with genuine spectacle. A fully powered Raiden run felt like conducting an orchestra of destruction. But the game's difficulty curve, especially in the later stages, assumed you were already playing at that level. And if you weren't there yet, the game had no mechanism for acknowledging that. It just kept going. The bullet density in the back half of Raiden is something that players who have only seen the early stages genuinely cannot picture without experiencing it. The screen fills, the patterns overlap, the safe corridors close, and the game keeps going at full speed because Raiden does not slow down for anyone. You either keep up or you die and lose your power-ups and attempt to rebuild from a weakened ship in the middle of a stage that was already too difficult for a fully powered ship. The Gradius death spiral, repackaged and accelerated. The boss fights have a rhythm to them that is learnable, genuinely satisfying when you crack it, and completely opaque the first, second, fifth, and 10th time you encounter them. Raiden was designed to be beaten. It just was not designed to be beaten by you in a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable amount of money. That was the deal on offer, and most people took it, because even losing to Raiden felt like something worth paying for. That is the highest compliment you can pay a quarter-eating machine. Number 2. Battletoads, Rare/Mindscape, 1994. Number 2. And before we get into this one, you need to understand something. The NES Battletoads, the one that destroyed an entire generation of kids on the Turbo Tunnel level, was not the hardest version of this game. The arcade version of Battletoads came out in 1994, and Rare looked at everything that made the NES version so infamous. Every single mechanic that turned the Turbo Tunnel into a shared cultural trauma, and they decided that wasn't enough. They decided they could do more. Battletoads, Rare, Mindscape, 1994, a 3-player brawler that is by any reasonable measure one of the most difficult arcade games ever made. The combat is fast and demanding in ways the NES version never attempted. The enemy health pools are large, the attack patterns are aggressive, and the game very quickly starts throwing combinations at you that require coordination between all 3 players simultaneously. Because if your partner gets grabbed and you do not help, they lose health they cannot afford to lose. And losing health in an arcade game means the same thing it always means. The Turbo Tunnel returns. Of course it does. And in the arcade version, with the bigger screen and the faster processor and the more detailed graphics, it is somehow even more demanding than the NES version that already broke a generation. The patterns are tighter. The timing is less forgiving. The visual noise is more intense. And the fact that you are playing it in a public arcade with people watching, with 2 other players counting on you to not be the reason the run ends, adds a dimension of pressure that playing it at home on your own television never could. Here is what makes the arcade Battletoads a specific kind of cruel that the NES version never quite reached. 3 players mean 3 people who all have to survive simultaneously. You can hit your partners, accidentally or otherwise. The social dynamics of standing next to 2 people you might not even know and trying to coordinate through some of the most demanding content in arcade history, while simultaneously trying not to be the person who kills the run with a poorly aimed attack, creates a pressure cooker that Rare absolutely understood when they designed it. Battletoads Arcade is number 2 on this list, and not number 1 because the game above it did not just make you quit. The game above it made an entire generation of people quit before they even understood what they were looking at. And that is a different level of achievement entirely. Number 1, Defender, Williams Electronics, 1981. Here we are, number 1. And if you know, you already knew it was going to be here. If you don't know, everything you are about to read is going to explain why this is the only possible answer. Defender, Williams Electronics, 1981. The game that introduced a standard of difficulty that the entire arcade industry spent the next 2 decades trying to match and never fully did. Let's start with the cabinet itself. Defender had 2 joysticks and 5 buttons. 5. In 1981, when most arcade games had 1 joystick and maybe 1 or 2 buttons, Williams put a control scheme in front of players that required both hands operating simultaneously in ways that took serious, dedicated, repeated practice just to survive the first screen. The thrust button accelerated. The reverse button instantly flipped your ship's direction, which sounds simple and is genuinely one of the hardest reflexive skills in arcade history to develop under pressure. The smart bomb cleared the screen of enemies, but you had a limited supply. The hyperspace button teleported you to a random position on the screen, which could save your life or put you directly inside a swarm of enemies, and you would not know which one it was going to be until it happened. And then the fire button, which you had to manage while executing all of the above simultaneously, in real time, at speeds that escalated every single wave. The learning curve on Defender was not a curve, it was a wall. A vertical, smooth, featureless wall that most players hit in the first 30 seconds, and never found a way around. The first time you sat down at a Defender cabinet, you did not know what was happening. You pressed some buttons. Your ship moved in a direction you did not intend. Something shot you from off-screen. You died. You put in another quarter. The exact same thing happened, except this time you had a slightly better understanding of what button caused the ship to accelerate, and a slightly worse understanding of everything else. Here's what Defender was actually asking of you. Once you got past the basics of not killing yourself. The game is a side-scrolling shooter set on the surface of a planet. Humanoids walk along the surface below you. Aliens called landers abduct those humanoids and carry them upward. If a lander reaches the top of the screen with a humanoid, it becomes a mutant. Mutants are faster, more aggressive, and attack with a specific aggression designed to end your run. If all the humanoids are abducted, the planet explodes, and the remaining enemies mutate entirely, and the game enters a new phase that is significantly harder than what came before it. You are not just fighting enemies. You are managing a crisis. You are flying horizontally across a scrolling battlefield, keeping track of the scanner at the top of the screen that shows you where the landers and humanoids are relative to your position, making split-second decisions about which abduction attempt to interrupt and which ones you have to let go because you cannot be everywhere at once, while simultaneously avoiding enemy fire from multiple directions, managing your smart bomb reserves, and deciding whether the hyperspace button is worth the risk of where it puts you. All of it at the same time. All of it getting faster every wave. Defender does not have a difficulty plateau. It does not reach a level and stay there. It escalates continuously, without ceiling, until you are dead, and then it escalates some more for the next person who puts in a quarter. Eugene Jarvis, who designed Defender, said in interviews that he wanted to make the hardest video game ever created. He wanted it to be so demanding that only the absolute best players in the world could survive it at its highest levels, and he succeeded. But here's the part that makes Defender not just the hardest game ever made, but the most important game on this list. Williams had to reduce the game's difficulty before it shipped, because test players weren't surviving long enough to understand what the game even was. They were quitting before they got to the part where the game became interesting. The version that shipped, the one with the difficulty already reduced from what Jarvis originally built, is what ended up in arcades across America. And it still broke people. It still emptied pockets. It still left players walking out of the arcade with that very specific combination of humiliation and fascination that the best quarter-eating machines produced. Because Defender was never just hard. It was hard in a way that made you want to understand it. The complexity wasn't an obstacle. It was a language. And most people never learned it. The players who cracked Defender, who mastered the scanner, who developed the reverse button reflex, who understood the humanoid management system well enough to survive past Wave 10, those players were a different category of human being in an arcade. Not just a different category of gamer. When you saw one of them at a cabinet, you stopped walking and you watched. Because watching someone play Defender well was genuinely one of the most impressive things the golden age of arcades ever produced. It was not just reflexes. It was systems thinking and crisis management and mechanical precision operating simultaneously at a level that almost nothing else in the room demanded. Defender is number one on this list. It is not close. And if you want to make the case for something else, we are genuinely here for that conversation, because the argument for Ghosts and Goblins is real, and the argument for Gradius is real, and the argument for Dragon's Lair, being in a category so different that it can't be compared, is also real. This list is worth fighting about, and we want you in the comments making your case. So there it is, 10 games. 10 different ways the arcade reached into your pocket and left you with nothing but the experience and the desperate certainty that you were going to come back next weekend and try again. From Gauntlet telling you out loud, in a voice you still hear in your sleep, that your life force was running out, all the way to Defender, building a control scheme so complex that most people never made it past the tutorial of figuring out what the buttons actually did. Every game on this list had one thing in common. They were not hard, because the developers didn't care. They were hard because the developers understood exactly what they were doing. They understood that the right amount of challenge, that specific calibration of almost but not quite, was the most powerful thing a coin-operated machine could possess. You did not lose those quarters because you were bad at video games. You lost them because these games were built by people who understood human psychology at a level that designers today openly study and cite. The arcade was not a place, it was a system. And these 10 cabinets were the most efficient parts of that system. Now here's what we want from you right now. Drop a comment and tell us where we got it wrong. Is Defender really number one? Or is there a game that belongs above it? Is Ghosts and Goblins too low? Does Dragon's Lair even deserve to be on a list about difficulty? Or is it really about memorization? And is there even a difference between those two things? Is there an arcade game that destroyed your Saturday afternoons that we left off this list entirely? Because there are more than 10. There were dozens of cabinets in every arcade across America, built with this exact same philosophy. And we want to know which ones left a mark on you specifically. Drop it in the comments. We read every single one, and this community has the best arguments on the internet. We mean that. If you want more content like this, more deep dives into the games that defined a generation, the ones that shaped who we are, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We are doing this every single week. We have more lists, more debates, more trips back to the rooms that smelled like carpet cleaner and glory, and we want you here for all of it. Because the golden age of arcades belongs to everyone who ever stood in front of one of those cabinets with a pocket full of quarters and a whole lot of confidence. And this is the place where that conversation lives. Thanks for watching. Now go find an emulator and try Defender for the first time. You will understand everything.